It all happened on my last holiday. It was a terrible experience. It was the worst holiday I have ever had. Me and my friend Renee, we decided to go to New Zealand. We were saving money for a very long time to go on this trip. It was our dream to go to the land of the Lord of the Rings. We had made reservations for flight at the end of July, and from that moment on, everything went wrong. It turned out that the flight was reserved for only one person, simply because a woman at the travel agency didn't understand us very well. I managed to reserve a flight, but a different one, so we couldn't go together. But I thought that it was not a big deal. My friend flew a few hours after me. I was going first. When I arrived at the airport, I was very happy because that meant that my holiday has just started and that nothing else could happen. And I was mistaken. When the hour of my flight was coming, I queued up to the custom clearance. My passport was right, and the next thing I had to do was to go through the metal detector. When I was passing through, it started to beep. I was so scared. I was taken aside immediately, and I felt like a thief. It was terrible. The custom officer had taken me to another room and she told me to undress. I tried to explain that I had a belly ring and maybe it was the cause of the beeping, but she didn't want to listen. I had to undress. They took my clothes somewhere else, and I was standing alone in the middle of the room. I was shocked and stressed. The woman came back after about 5 minutes, which seemed to be ages for me. She gave me back my clothes, but I was not allowed to put them on. She checked me one more time with a small metal detector, which was obviously beeping in front of my belly ring. Of course, the custom officials went through all of my things, but they didn't find anything. I was late for my flight, so I had to wait for another one. My friend was supposed to meet me at the airport, and it was me who should be waiting for her. She was terrified that I was not there, but fortunately, she decided to wait. After that horrible flight, we met at the airport and we went to our hostel. It turned out that we expected something different, but it was not that bad, and we were too tired to look for something else. New Zealand is the most beautiful country I have ever seen, and we loved everything about it. The people, their customs, their food, basically everything, and the entire environment. We spent 3 weeks there. We had a really good time, but when the time ended, we had to fly back home. I was a little bit scared. This time, I decided to remove my belly ring. We came to the airport about 3 hours before the departure time. At the entrance to the airport, we saw an older woman who had a large card with the word written on it with capital letters, Poland. So I came up to her and I started to speak in Polish. She smiled and we started to chat together. When we were just about to leave, she asked me if I could take a box of chocolates with me and give it to her son in Poland. He was supposed to meet me at the airport because she would phone him. And of course I agreed. And then it started again. At the custom clearance, everything was okay. I came through the metal detector and nothing happened. My passport was alright. I was almost free when the custom officer asked me about the chocolates. I said that it was given to me by the lady at the entrance and that her son is going to take it back at the airport in Poland. The custom officer asked me to open the box. I didn't want to agree as it was not mine, but I had to. It turned out that inside there were not chocolates, but cocaine worth $20,000. I was taken to jail. I spent 2 days there and then everything had been explained. I could come back home and the lady and her son were caught and also taken to jail. I don't have to explain why this was the worst holiday ever.
Our feelings are always hard to control. We are humans after all. Sometimes we do things we can't explain, just because we feel that way. I had a student named Daniel, a sweet and innocent child. I was prepared to do anything for him, but don't judge me just yet. First, let me tell you my story. My name is Jolene. I'm a 21-year-old math teacher at a primary school. I live with my sister and my mother. My house was next to the school where I work. I love teaching, and I like teaching the students in creative ways. They loved me, and I loved them. Daniel was a special student, though. Our story began at the start of the new year. It was the first day of school. I missed all my students over the summer break. I missed them so much that I stood by the door to welcome them back. Before I started my first lesson, Mr. Smith, the student affairs officer, knocked on the class door, with Daniel hiding behind his back. Mr. Smith greeted the class and asked them to greet Daniel, but Daniel was too shy and didn't move. So I went over to him to take him by the hand, but he pulled his hand away, which embarrassed Mr. Smith. I asked him to greet his classmates, so he went and he stood in front of the class and he said, "Hello, I am Daniel." Then he went and he sat at the very back of the class. He didn't talk much with the other kids. He didn't like to interact with anyone. Daniel always looked sad, and I thought to myself, he's only 8. What could possibly have made him that way? I tried to get close to him, but he resisted all my efforts. Sometimes he looked like he was hiding some big secret, and later on, I learned what it was. One night, when I was surfing the social media, I came across a horrible news story about a jealous husband killing his wife and another man right in front of his son. The child had been none other than my new student Daniel. Reading that sad story, I started understanding why Daniel was acting that way. I decided to try brightening his life a little. Every day, I would buy a small present and put it on his desk. At first, it had no effect, but slowly he came to love that. During break time, I would sit beside him, and we would share food together. I would get him involved in class activities. On his birthday, I arranged a surprise party with his class, his grandmother, and myself. He was so happy that day. After the party, he hugged me and he told me that he loved me. I hugged him tightly. He was not just a student to me. I treated him like he was my own son. He told me that he wanted to call me mother, and that made me so happy. After his grandmother died, he came to live with me. We faced a lot of problems together, but I followed his success in life with pride. Daniel is all grown up now. He's graduating from the Faculty of Engineering. I am so proud of what he has made of himself.
Tradition and Perdition. This article has an intriguing title, doesn't it? I wonder what strange storyline you were trying to imagine in your mind. Maybe you are right, maybe you are wrong, or maybe the story is totally different from what you are imagining. Let's see how good your imagination is. My name is Samuel, Sam for short. I'm 23 years old, and I'm an electronic engineer. I'm just an average person like the majority of people you meet in daily life. Nothing special. My only goal in life is to fall in love. I dream of having a girlfriend that I can love, protect, support, do my best for, and make happy. She would be my queen, and I would be her knight in shining armor. But I know that love stories rarely reflect real life. I've tried to date a lot of girls so far, but I've failed every time, to the point where I've lost hope. So I decided to just focus on my work until one day, destiny surprised me and brought Maya into my little world. I work in software and social media, and I have a consulting website where people can contact me to help them with computer problems. I was never bothered by customers' personalities. To me, they're just customer numbers and cash cows. Until Maya called me. She had a problem with her laptop and asked for my help fixing it. I don't know why I took my time solving her problem, but then again, I do because I like to hear the sound of her soft voice. Before hanging up, I asked her to call me later socially. I expected her to make an excuse why she couldn't, but after 2 minutes, she promised to call me later. I was thrilled by her response. I waited many days for her call. It never came, and I began to lose hope, when suddenly, she did call me again. We talked for hours. Time simply flew by so quickly. I felt as if I loved her, but how can that be when I've never even met her before? We decided to meet up at a botanical garden. She told me she would wear a purple dress with mottled flowers on it. I told her I would be holding some flowers. I arrived at the garden and skimmed through the crowds looking for her, but couldn't find her. Then suddenly I heard her soft voice behind me say, "Hello." I turned around. Her face was angelic. We sat, ate, chatted, and laughed. When I took her home, she looked at me suddenly and said, "I might love you." No one could imagine my feelings at that moment. I was in seventh heaven. I asked her to marry me at that very moment, but she hesitated. I asked her what was wrong. At my insistence, she told me she had a secret that she couldn't tell me. I asked if she was in love with another guy. She hugged me and said, "Of course not." I thought, why does destiny have to make life so complicated? Regardless, I made up my mind to meet her family, so I visited her father at work, and he invited me to their home. When I got there, I found that they were an elegant Asian family, so polite. They were everything I could have hoped for. Maya spoke in a subdued manner on occasion and was looking around a lot. I thought that maybe that was because she was nervous with me being there to meet her family. We selected a wedding date just 2 weeks from now. Maya seemed sad during this period, and I asked her many times what was wrong, but she never answered me. I even gave her a chance to back out of the wedding in case she had gotten cold feet, but she assured me that she wanted to marry me very much, and she begged me not to abandon her. I was puzzled by her behavior. At our wedding party, I was ecstatic. I invited my family and friends. I was waiting for Maya, and she arrived wearing a veil and escorted by her father. The veil was very dark, and I couldn't see her face at all. I thought perhaps she was very shy or embarrassed on this special day when she was the focus of everyone. After the party, we drove home. I tried to hold her hand, but she pulled her hand away. That's odd, I thought. Once we arrived home, I tried to talk to her and hug her, but she suddenly screamed and started jumping around on the tables and chairs like a monkey. What in the world is going on here, I thought. Suddenly, the doorbell rang. I opened it to find Maya's father with someone out of sight behind him. Slowly, the person stepped from behind him. It was Maya. What? I couldn't believe my eyes. I was completely taken aback, nonplussed, confused. I managed to stammer, Who are you?" "I'm Maya," she replied simply. I pointed to my bride monkeying around the room behind me and asked with a puzzled and shocked expression on my face, "Then who is she?" Her father replied in a matter-of-fact tone, "That is Taya, my oldest daughter." I looked at Maya and she shrugged helplessly and explained, "It's our tradition that the oldest daughter has to marry first before the younger one can get married. I tried to tell you, but I couldn't because otherwise no one would marry Taya due to her mental illness." I didn't understand. Many questions were rolling in my mind. You mean, I married Taya instead of you? I had been tricked, betrayed. I felt as if I were in an insane asylum or a nightmare or the butt of some bad joke. Some days after this travesty, when I would find myself walking down the street in a trance, I would frequently break out in hysterical laughter. Passers-by would look at me askance and move away from me as if I were some raving lunatic. Perhaps I was. I had become a laughingstock once news of my story made the rounds. Maya and her father had pulled off their shady scheme flawlessly and suckered me right in. And I fell for it. Lying on a psychiatrist's couch, I asked him, "Doctor, what is the wrong with me?"
Every one of us has a talent. It may be singing beautifully, drawing artistically, writing poetically. We're all different. Our special talents make us happy. We are all unique in our own way, living in a world full of peace, love, and happiness. But what if our talent became our bane? Well, my talent did become my bane. Let me tell you how. My name is Jenny, and I'm 16 years old. I lived in a quiet neighborhood with my parents and my little brother Matthew. I didn't have a lot of friends or hobbies. I was only interested in social media, but I always had a feeling that I had something unique, something that distinguished me from others. Turned out I was right. It all started on my grandmother's birthday. My family and I were traveling to her home to celebrate the occasion. The road was narrow and bumpy, with a rocky shoulder on one side and a river on the other. Dad was driving too fast, so obviously, Mom was a bit worried. Conversely, Matthew was excited. It was raining so hard that day that Dad feared the weather might get even worse, so he was driving faster than he should have to try to arrive at Grandma's house quickly. I was worried too, but for a slightly different reason. I had a feeling of impending doom on that trip. The rain got progressively worse. There was almost continuous lightning and thunder. Suddenly, we saw a big truck that had stopped on the road ahead of us. Mom screamed. Dad swerved to avoid hitting the truck and lost control of the car, which had gone on one of its sides and off the road into the river. It was the most frightening situation I had ever experienced in my whole life. We went underwater, and I felt as if we were in an aquarium. Dad was unconscious, and his forehead was bleeding. Mom was struggling, and Matthew was paralyzed with fear, his eyes tightly shut. Then, my vision went dark. When I woke up, I found myself in a hospital bed, with a team of doctors around me. When I asked them about my family, the look on their faces told me that I was the sole survivor of that horrible accident. Several days had passed since the accident. I was having trouble sleeping. The doctors gave me some sleeping pills. They even tried hypnosis to help me sleep. Grandma came to visit me. She was very sad. She said I could come live with her. My whole life was turned upside down in an instant. A police officer at the hospital was kind enough to drive Grandma and I to her home. After he dropped us off, something strange happened. In a fraction of a second, I had a vision, a momentary premonition that something bad was going to happen to him. I saw him trying to catch a thief, and suddenly crashing into another car. So I thanked him for the ride, and told him to take care of himself, to be very careful. He smiled, and said that he will. The very next day, as I was watching the news, I saw a report that very same kind officer had died in a car crash, just like my premonition. Grandma was upset when I told her what had happened. I didn't tell her that I had foreseen his death, because I knew that she wouldn't believe me. In fact, she might have even thought I was crazy. This strange turn of events happened again, with one of our neighbors, who visited us one day. She was a kind, lovely woman. I had a premonition that she would die in her kitchen due to a gas line explosion. I urged her to be careful with the cooking gas, because it could be so dangerous. But she just laughed, and said that she loved cooking, and that there's nothing to fear. Grandma got a bit upset with me for making a big deal out of nothing. She said that I was just a little paranoid due to the accident, and that my imagination was getting way too overactive, and that I shouldn't try to scare people. Needless to say, the neighbor that I had warned did indeed die in a gas line explosion 4 days later. Coincidence? I think not. Am I somehow causing these incidents to happen? I couldn't help but think that I was somehow linked to the whole thing. I searched the internet for any information about this phenomena, and I found that it was common in people who had been involved in a traumatic experience, especially almost drowning incidents. I read a research that said that parts of the subject's brain would become very active. After our neighbor's accident, my aunt and uncle came to visit us. I had missed them a lot, but yet again, I had a premonition that they would have an accident going home, causing their car to explode and crash into the river. 2 days later, they were preparing to leave and head home. I begged them to stay one more night, but they said that they couldn't because they had work the next day. I told Grandma about my premonition, and she scolded me, told me to stop this nonsense. She thought it was my overactive imagination again. My uncle came in as Grandma was scolding me and asked me what was wrong. I wanted to say, "Nothing important, Uncle. Just premonitions of doom, that's all." But I didn't. I went to sleep instead and had a dream that Uncle was going to get run over by a car. Suddenly, I woke up to the sound of Uncle and Grandma's voices. They were talking about me, and it was raining outside. Uncle stood up and said that he had to get something from his car. I sat up straight and shouted, "No, don't go." Uncle said, "Jenny, it'll be fine. I'll just get something from the car." I couldn't dissuade him from going, so I followed him out. Uncle went out to his car and was standing by its door, which was facing the road. Then I saw the headlights. A car was coming down the road, driving towards us. I saw the car hit a flooded spot on the road and suddenly began sliding sideways, right towards Uncle. Instinctively, I made a decision to try and protect him. I had to at least try. I jumped in front of the swerving car. The driver saw me and tried to regain control. Suddenly, I felt a warm sunshine mysteriously coming down from the sky amidst the rain, and I felt calm and safe. And I had one final premonition before everything went dark.
Hi, my name is Selena. I'm 19 years old, and I'm just crazy about basketball. I follow all the sports news, the star players, and the league statistics. I know the names of all the famous players around the world. My friends were amused by this because their interests ran more towards makeup, fashion, singers, and movie stars. I thought those girl things were just outright vain. Shallow, frivolous, and downright silly to tell the truth. The college's basketball team coach was forced to take leave due to a chronic illness, leaving the team without a coach. Due to my high school reputation and widely recognized basketball expertise, I was asked if I wanted to serve as the basketball team's temporary coach. I had always dreamed of someday becoming a coach for a famous basketball team, so I jumped at the opportunity. School leagues presented opportunities for players to show what they've got and maybe get scouted by a professional league team. It was also my chance to start as a college basketball coach. By studying the opposing team's previous games, I analyzed their strategies and learned their strengths and weaknesses. I was able to excel and drive my team to an undefeated streak of winnings. We won the college league championship. I was selected to train a team in a professional league with another famous coach. It was an incredible opportunity for me to up my game a notch. During this time, I met an opposing team's coach named Jacob, who was something of a genius when it came to winning basketball strategies. He shared the same dreams as mine. He bragged that his team was better than mine. Well, I couldn't ignore the gauntlet he threw at my feet, so I challenged him to a game. My team against his, in the upcoming season, and may the best team win. If my team won, he would acknowledge me as a superior coach, and vice versa. The season began, and both our teams began beating all our opponents. I used these victories to hone my coaching skills to the next level. Both our teams were undefeated until the day we were to face each other in a championship game. The game began, and both teams played hard. We stayed closely matched the entire game. In the final few seconds of play, one of their players got past our defense. He scored a buzzer beat. I was crushed and began to cry, but my team's fans in the stadium broke into a loud applause. They began chanting my name, acknowledging that I have given them a great competitive, entertaining game. Jacob came over to me. I figured he came to gloat, but instead, he got down on one knee and presented me with an engagement ring. I was in shock. The stadium cheered even louder. I may have lost the game that day, but for some reason, I felt like a winner.